Boom, recording. Proteus coming at you.
We haven't I haven't seen you in a little while. We talk on the phone every now and then.
Mhm.
Um Congratulations on all your success, coach.
Thank you. Thanks, Coach.
Um
You too.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess I haven't really been I haven't had any students like win anything of note this year, but other
Oh yeah, you
than
got to
like
hang out with
former
Malcolm
coach.
Gladwell though, so that was pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fine. I've been enjoying that. We had a couple ideas for videos or just things to discuss. What were those ideas?
So the two big ones that we thought we'd talk about are we want to talk about different changes to how tournament seasons could be structured, basically, and whether
Yeah,
the term tournament's even relevant in that world is a discussion.
yeah,
But the other thing we talked about was eventually doing a like draft video where me and
yeah.
Sasan come up with a list of traits that we think like debaters have that are good traits, maybe 15, 20 traits, and then we sit down and we try and draft one by one, like snake draft style, five of those traits to make the best debater, and then we discuss why we think the debater we drafted in that sense would be most effective.
Uh, I also think that speaks to the concept of style, right?
Mm-hmm.
People say with music that your goal in practice is to be perfect, and all of the ways in which you're not capable of perfection eventually become your style.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which is a weird concept when you say it like that, but like BB King like basically pretty much invented uh like string bends, and he did it because he was bad at slide guitar.
Mm-hmm.
He just wanted to get that effect, but he wasn't good at it, so he figured some other way around it, and that was kind of his style. And I think there's something to be said about that in debate also, right? I think there's like, okay, you have certain limitations, so how do you like minimize the damage of those limitations and maximize the returns on the stuff that you aren't limited in? Um, but yeah, do you want to talk about the first thing first?
Sure.
So, here's kind of what I was thinking about, and you can tell me if it's a crazy idea or not, right? Or what you don't like about it. Um, and to be clear, if you just love this idea, I think that would be really fucking boring. Um, let me. Okay, you can hear me okay?
Yeah, totally fine.
So, let me just screen
You actually
share.
sound great.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. You don't have the whiteboard on your
Uh,
screen share options?
I feel like I should. Where would that be? A whiteboard. Yeah, I do.
Oh, okay. Do I not have access to it?
I
Can you
just
make
I
me
just
take
made one.
photos?
Hopefully you do now.
Oh, this is like a whole thing. This is like newer Zoom that I guess I haven't updated my stuff.
Sorry. Yeah, I see you on there. So
Yeah, okay. This is
I've never
like
even used the
intimidating.
whiteboard. So sweet.
Yeah, I mean, I when I taught on Zoom, you'd like it's your whiteboard, but this is a whole lot more elaborate than what I was using mid-pandemic. Wow, whoever was really working on this whiteboard project over at Zoom got it finished just in time for no one to ever use it
Yeah,
again.
of course. Yeah.
So the way we normally do um, forensics, right, is we have like a season that looks like this from start to end. And then we have all sorts of like little milestones. Like, let's say here, um, God, you have to click on this every single time. Here,
Guess he didn't do enough work during that.
dude, what were you doing,
We
guy?
took everything back, whiteboard guy.
Yeah. So you end up with stuff that, what? Okay. So you get like first tournament, you get like random invitational. You get like random invitational 2, and then let's say like states, regionals, and then oh, I don't know what that did. And you get Nats, right? And obviously there's more tournaments to the year than this, but this is kind of the way it goes in college world. In high school, it's a little bit different. You use more of the season, like Nats is like NSDA Nats is in like June, but the which is insane. Like these kids are like graduating high school in a week and they're going to like whatever. Um in college the season's over in like April, and then you got like all the rest of April, all the rest of May, maybe the beginnings of June, depending on where you go to school, where you're kind of not doing anything, but I guess that's time for you to be like a real student. Um, I think this is really ineffective. I think this is really expensive. I think it's a huge time suck. And I think this doesn't create a season where anything has anything to do with anything else, because you would think that there's a sequence to these things, but really you can go to any of these tournaments, and like whether you go to nationals has nothing to do with whether you went to state, because the state organizations and the national organizations are different. And even when they're not, right, like take college, you got Fire Pie Nationals, and then you have like the tournament before that is like Fire Pie Region 4 or something like that, right? Or like our state tournament, which is Region 1 and 2. Attending one and doing
Region just got
well.
changed as well, but yeah.
Oh, what is that?
Well, so for us, it's still the same, but basically there used to be like 19 regions, and now there's 7.
Really?
Like
For
basically
Fire
every
Pie?
region that's not California and or sorry, Northern and Southern California
Yeah.
has in some way been heavily consolidated with like 3 other regions.
Makes
Anyway,
sense.
yeah,
Um yeah, so like going to states is not the prerequisite to going to nationals. They're just totally different things. Um Here is my thought, right? What if you like the big inefficiency is, I think, tournaments, where tournaments take at the very least one full long weekend day. I've been running a lot of tournaments this year, um, and yeah, I don't think it's viable for the um, smallest version of doing debate to be such a financial and time cost, right? Because let's say you take the like a 1 day tournament. I think a 1 day tournament has 4 debate prelims, uh 2 debate out rounds.
you put a dollar sign.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to get this thing out of my screen, um but I can't seem to move it. The whiteboard guy. Um okay. Okay, there we go. Oh, I put a dollar sign. Yeah, there you go. 4 debate prelims, 2 debate out rounds, and then you got what, like, what's the 16 teams, 12 teams, let's say,
Sure.
12 entries, um, and you have, because of that, let's say 6 judges, and each of those judges for 1 day, I don't know what is standard in different places, but let's say 150, right? If they are getting paid to judge. I mean, it's possible that these people are volunteers, it's possible that they are provided by the schools, but even if you look at just that, that's $900 in like paying for judges, which means that in order for you to get the smallest viable version of this activity to work, you need um, several teams to sign up. You need like lots of students, you need lots of judges, and you need to bring in a ton of money. So signups are pretty expensive, right? I don't know, like if you're taking a set of kids to a random weekend tournament, you're probably paying a school fee of like $25. You're probably paying something like $20 an entry. Um, so you take, say, 6 kids, um, you're already spending like $150. And if you don't have judges, then you have to pay, I don't know, $200, $300, which isn't crazy to think about, right? Like, it's not crazy to think that a small program would pay $300 for a weekend. But you have to consider that that's like a massive barrier to a lot of people getting in the activity and trying their hands with it. So I'm imagining something different, right? Um, so here is the vision that I have, and I want you to tell me everything you hate about it. Like stress test this idea. So how do I erase things? Shape, line, text, sticky, template, up more tools? Nope. How? There used to be an eraser. Now I can't. Oh, I can just move things? Okay, we're just going to move then. Great. Um, so what if instead there was the preseason and the postseason? And this is complicated by the fact that debate already exists. And so you can't get every existing organization to use this format. It would just need to be like one debate format that does this. And everybody can do whatever they want in the regular season, but then they like also some weeks do this. But I don't know. I don't know how that would work exactly, but here's what it would look like, right? It would be your preseason. You have is this going to be huge? No, I don't want that. In the preseason there's going to be a certain number of single scrimmages. Let's say 20, right? And a single scrimmage is one school.
Wait, real quick. I think you
Yeah.
need to clarify what you mean by the words preseason and postseason. Because where is season? Because the
Well,
word
I didn't mean
postseason.
preseason. Sorry, I meant the regular season.
Okay, okay, that's why I was like, what? Like, where? This is like when
Yeah,
they're
no, 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 no.
off. Okay,
No, no,
cool, cool,
no.
cool. Got it, got it, got it, got
This is one school versus one school, and it is like a single day, 2 round uh, scrimmage, right? Um, and the way I kind of imagine it is there is also 2 events, uh, like basically like evidentiary debate and like limited prep. So each school can have any number of competitors on the team, and everyone on the team can contribute to prep and strategy. But for the actual debates, there are going to be 2 AF debaters prepped, 2 neg debaters prepped, 2 AF debaters limited prep, 2 neg debaters limited prep. And the different styles of debate happen at the same time. So basically, all you really need, right, is one school to host and the other school can get to. And if this is like regionally built in, that's really easy to do. You need 2.5 hours of after school time. Let's say you need time for people to get there. So let's say it's 4 o'clock. You go like 4 to 6. 45-minute debate, 15 minutes between the debates. And then what would happen, right, is you have, let's say you and I are, our schools are competing. We would be given a topic for this week's debate by whatever organizational body. And you have time to prepare for it. And you come up with a strategy, you find cards, you do whatever, just like LD, PF, whatever. And then while you work on it as a school, people will decide, okay, I'm going to be the first AF speaker on this, right? And depending on the size of your team, you can have people fill in multiple roles. So for example, let's just take the evidentiary debate first, right? Your school is going to debate the evidentiary debate topic first on the AF and then on the neg. If you have only 2 people who want to do an evidentiary debate format, you can have them prep and debate both AF and neg. But if you have more people and you want to get more people in the debates, you can just have a team that is affirmative for this debate and a team that is negative for this debate, right? And so there are 4 debates that happen total, AF neg for the 2 different kinds. And you are like, you score a certain amount of points based on.
When you say 2 AF debaters prepped, do you mean they are on one team together, or that this is solo debate where it's 2 different AF debates and 2 different NIG debates happening per round?
Well, there's 2 different formats. There's like parley and there's like LD, I guess 2-on-2 LD, maybe it's 1-on-1 LD, right? But the idea is that there is in LD, there is going to be an AF, there's going to be 2 rounds of LD. You debate both sides of the topic. And you can have the same student debate both AF and neg.
So this tournament has 4 total debate rounds. Like,
Yes.
4 debates happen over 2 rounds.
Yes, totally. And you need 2 judges, right? Now the tricky thing, and probably the like part where this idea falls apart, is that judge cannot be from either school because there's only 2 schools there. So you might have to do something where each week somebody from one school rotates to go to another school and judge their debate round. Maybe you have a competitor or a couple competitors from your school. So if you have, like, each week you need to commit to sending somebody over to another school to judge another round, right? And then you are kind of their third party. Now, it's kind of iffy having competitors judge the people that they will later compete against, but whatever, let's imagine that, right? So then what happens is you get a certain number of points. If you won all 4 debate rounds, you got 4-0. If you won some, lost one, you won 1-3, you won 2-2, whatever, right? So then there is a playoffs, and the amount of points that you score doing these weekly debates is what determines what schools qualify to go to the playoffs. And then the playoffs are just these existing tournament models, right? Send as many teams as you want. There's prepped, there's parley. You can go in whichever ones you want. There's going to be multiple rounds a day. Maybe we even just seed and go straight into elimination, or you have prelim rounds and out rounds or whatever. So essentially we reserve, like, does it matter who the best school at the DVC thing is, right? Doesn't matter at the Chabot tournament who the number one school is. Like we have these tournaments that are built off this model of, well, we have to find out who definitively the best LDer was. But I feel like it takes so much time and work and money and energy to for every single like instance of getting debate practice to have a full tournament where you definitively find out who was the best that weekend. And it's also so arbitrary because nobody's going to care by the end of the year who won Chabot. It's going to be who won states, who won nationals, right? And so why not just eliminate that aspect of the first one where like the point of these debates is to have shorter, bite-sized bits where people in your school can participate with variable amounts of commitment. You can have a kid that's just helping prep, just helping do some research, just watching to get some experience. And maybe next week they'll be brave enough to try one of these speeches. And then if your school overall does well enough and you qualify to go to whatever tournament, you then enter them in as a team or whatever. But you don't get this situation where you have somebody who's like showing up to the debate room and is kind of curious about doing debate. And you're like, well, if you're interested in doing debate, I need you to do a lot of research on capital gains tax, more than you've ever had to do for any school assignment, write compelling arguments for the affirmative and negative in a format that you've never been exposed to. And that is the bare minimum for you to be allowed to try this activity. And then you'll have to do it 4 to 6 times. It just feels like that's way too much. Like it feels like doing less while still staying engaged with it is like like think about like someone doing their first impromptu, right? You get to go to like a handful of impromptu practices and then you go to a tournament where you do it 2 times. And maybe you go to finals, maybe you don't, right? But then you kind of like have a sense of if you like it, if you want to do something different, something like that, you know? Compared to like if you had to write a persuasive speech in order to just try forensics. And think about all the ways in which at the DVC team we try not to get people started with platform speeches because it takes so long to get those speeches up that it's just hard to get that commitment and the buy-in and people enjoying the activity and trying the activity. So how do we make it so that you can engage in the activity in more bite-sized ways, but there's still this like robust tournament structure for figuring out who the best teams and the best competitors in a region are when that result actually matters and when we like actually give a shit about knowing who is the best person at this right now. Because it occurs to me that we're spending a lot of time and energy and money to like do 6 debate prelims when like the results don't matter. What people need is exposure and they need practice, and they can do that in shorter bursts, especially if we could get that to be more consistent, right? If we can have you do like 1 debate a week for a particular season, then I think that ultimately adds up to more. And I think ultimately like you collaborate with your schoolmates and like coming up with strategies and stuff for it. I just think there's something here, but that's the idea.
Is this for the high school level or the college level?
It could be either. And I wonder like what I would say is that this functions as an extracurricular. So if this is the only thing that your school does as a debate program, it's hard to explain how like what happens if you don't make the postseason. But the same is true of your high school or your college basketball team, right? Like it's this commitment. You show up and you do these times. Your students are treated like like athletes. You have an athletic
But is
budget.
it a class?
that's the thing is, this couldn't be a class. But if you're
I
in a
think
debate
that
class, you
disad
could do this.
instantly to me, whatever benefits this had no longer matter. Because what
Well,
you're
I feel
saying
like
is
most
like 50
programs
people are
aren't
going
a
to
class.
lose. Every community college program is class.
Okay, sure. Let's okay.
And so
Sure.
like you're
Let's
saying
talk
like
about that.
50
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
minimum. 50
Yeah.
people minimum lose their job tomorrow so that we can have more people do less debate.
Okay. Two things on that, right? One, this would be one format of debate that can exist within it doesn't have to be 20 weeks, right? It can be 6 weeks, right? And then one tournament or something like that, right? But the idea is that you have little bite-sized scrimmages, one-on-one, school versus school, and then at the end you have the actual tournament that determines things. That seems like the way most sports function, rather than making every week of playing basketball an entire basketball tournament. Like that doesn't seem necessary or make sense or be sustainable. So it can exist within an existing like season class region structure, right? With that having been said, um I, I can see there being a better alternative that doesn't exist right now, but I don't see how the current model has much more of a future for those same 50 people, given the like free fall that debate participation numbers are in.
I think that part of the question for me
And
is
you
kind
can
of
make
about
us bigger rather
like
than
which
just have the whole.
events you're talking about, right?
Sure,
Because
make
there
our
are
faces
some
bigger.
because obviously like Parley is smaller than it used to be, and like LD is smaller than it used to be, and IPDA continues to only get bigger, and Public Forum continues to only get bigger, and is the biggest it's ever been. And I think that speaks to something about the nature of those formats as opposed
Is
to
public forum the biggest it's ever been?
yes, and in college now, which it didn't even used to be.
Yeah, now it kind of exists in college.
Yeah,
Because I was only aware of PyCap having it before.
yeah, it's getting a lot bigger. They actually tried to expand it into some SoCal tournaments this year. But I guess just going down the line of things, right? So number one, I think school versus school does
Hold
pose
on,
a
real
lot of problems.
quick. Are our faces big enough on your screen that it's not just this whiteboard? Because I don't think the whiteboard matters anymore.
Okay,
You can
cool. Let
even
me get
just
rid of the
close
whiteboard.
it. Okay.
Well, okay, yeah. So number one, I think that the school versus school thing is a problem. I think that that means that you have to have a higher judge for every round. And
Um,
higher judges are more expensive to programs than non-hired judges. If I can judge, so for instance, a lot of the tournaments that we go to in Parley, I cover everyone. Like there is no judge fee.
yeah, yeah. I
Uh,
mean, I think you can
and
have.
you have your like rotating thing, but like, dog, I'm not signing up to go judge at a tournament my kids aren't at. Like what? Why would I?
Why not?
Because I don't care about the other people's kids.
But that facilitates your kids getting to do their debate.
But so would just paying for judges.
Well, then just pay for judges. I don't understand. If you
Well, so
can
here's
pay
my
for
point. Why
judges,
wouldn't
I
having
don't.
four schools where no one has to pay for judges and we all get to be with our students be better than one coach or one competitor every weekend having to go somewhere that the rest of their team is not and judge debates for
Okay,
free?
in college land where everybody has judges and you don't need to hire them, that is great. But that even
But that's the
in
thing. You keep.
college, that doesn't really seem to exist.
I
Like,
think the
what
difference
tournament
between
doesn't need to? How many
Janice
judges did you
Davidson
hire for?
has no fees whatsoever. You just have to cover all your judges completely free.
And none of those schools hire judges for the Janice Davidson.
I suppose you can if you have like a ton of kids coming, but obviously if you're a big program, that tends to be, those are the ones who need to hire judges. The big programs who have the money. Like what program has so many students that they need to hire judges because they can't cover it, but also isn't a big program.
I mean, I just think judges are an expensive part of this activity. And yeah, if
Let me
you're
put this to you. Why would the existing structure, but every tournament says you have to cover judges and there will be no tournament fees, not be better than your system?
because if I'm starting a program and I have 6 students, I can't cover all of them, and it is expensive for
In
me
your
to hire
system,
a
you can't
judge.
even have 6 students debate. So why is that relevant?
Well, I don't. Yeah, of course you can have 6
You
students,
said you get 4. You get 2 AF, 2 neg. That's 4.
but there's 2 different formats of debate happening at the same time. So you can
So
have up
there's
to
8 total.
there's 8 total speakers, and you can have that be
But it could
4
be 6
students. You could
kids
have
or
it
4
be
students. Yeah.
yeah. You can yeah.
So what's pretend I'm a small school and have like, I mean, not a small school, like I'm a new program, but I happen to have
Yeah.
12 kids sign up. Like 4 of them
Then
potentially
you
just don't
get
debate.
each week. Well, yeah, each week you decide which 8 of them are debating, and the other 4 just collaborate and work with them, and maybe next week they'll be in.
I think what that assumes is that the part of debate most people enjoy is not the debating.
I don't think it assumes
Because
that,
like
but I
you're
think
saying
it's
to
the
kids
same.
like, hey, you
But
can do
it's
all the
like
work,
saying
but you don't get to debate.
what about basketball? You have people sit on the bench in basketball. What sports team has every player play every game?
I don't think most, but wrestling does. Tennis
Okay,
does. Golf
okay,
does.
sure. But I don't think that
Swimming does.
model is as tenable.
In what sense?
I think it requires too much of a commitment to get started.
I think that why do you assume the conversion rate in your format of debate will be higher or lower for people to stick around? Because I think it's going to be significantly lower. And
Why
the
do you think
reason I think that, I'll explain real quick, is let's pretend I'm kid who gets 1 debate a week, 1 AF debate, 1 neg debate, whatever. Let's just pretend
yeah.
that's me. Maybe I get 2. You know, obviously there's different situations. Some kid might get 4 or whatever. Actually, not 4, but 2 maximum, right? Let's
Yeah.
say I lose those 2 debates.
Yeah.
Why am I coming back? I did 2 debates. I lost both of them. Like having 4 rounds or 6 rounds. Like obviously, if you're terrible, you might lose all 6 too, and that might be discouraging. But like the more debates you have, especially with power matching, the more likely it is that some kid wins the debate and catches the bug. Like in your model, it's possible some kid goes to a tournament, has 1 or 2 debates, loses it, and the next week their coach is like, by the way, you're not debating next week. You're just a researcher. And that kid's like, well, then peace?
How is that not okay? But if that were as discouraging as you're indicating, I don't think something like basketball would be sustainable. You know, like the idea that, hey, we're playing 2 games, you lose your first 2 games of the season, or you lose your first game of the season, and then your coach is like, hey, you're benched for this next game.
But
I can
that,
see how that
I think
would be
that
discouraging, but
ignores
I also
though
see
that, because what you're talking about is exposing people to debate, right? People getting a taste of debate. Bro, people play basketball outside of school and inside of school from age 6. And so that doesn't happen with debate. There's no outside of the team we do debate.
I'm less talking about exposing a child to the concept of debate and more talking about making the level of commitment. Like, let's say you are like, this is what I do for work right now, right? Is I talk to a school that doesn't have a debate program, and they say, I would be interested in having a debate program. What do I need to do? And I think right now, the answer to that is you need to hire somebody who already knows everything they need to know about debate. And then you need to hope, after you've hired this person, that there will be enough interest among the students to make that monetary investment worth it. Then you need to require the students to do a lot of academic work, um, like on top of everything they're already doing at school and give up several entire weekends, which are like very difficult asks.
I think that the part where you say like several entire weekends assumes a world where the kids do like debate, in which case the juice is worth the squeeze, right? Because if a kid goes to one tournament and hates it, then they gave up one weekend.
I think we only have debate kids in debate. Like, we don't have mathletes in debate. We don't have track stars in debate. We don't have the kids that do robotics. Like, it's so capitalizing on all of your time, and so many other extracurriculars you can do. You can be on the cheer team, and you can do robotics, and you can do whatever else, right? Quiz bowl. But every, like,
I mean, we had a ton of kids, dude, at GSA who debate was their fifth extracurricular. And like
yeah, and
maybe
how
those
many of
folks
them
don't
went
go
to?
to
Okay,
tournaments,
how
but like
many? Well, that's what I mean. How many people signed up for GSA and they're like, "Oh, I can't do debate because I will never be able to give up an entire Saturday because I have too many other
how come they can
activities."
give up like Saturdays for robotics competitions?
Because the robotics competition is every 2 months if it's a full day, but also like is just part of a day for most of them. The smallest version of our activity that exists is one day, like all day. And I
Mm-hmm.
think like there's no reason in my mind not to have some version of forensics. Maybe it's not like an entire activity, maybe it doesn't replace an existing model. Like at
It
uh
seems like what you're into is just schools scrimmaging more. And I
well,
don't know why you need an entire model of debate designed around that.
because if the scrimmages actually count for points, people will go to the scrimmages. But if they are just things that you do on top of the tournaments, and the tournaments are the things that matter, I just don't I just don't think the full weekend tournament in the middle of the season is is viable. I think
So
like
can we
you
come back
get
to judges real quick then? Is it easier to get judges during the week or on the weekend?
it depends on what you mean by judges and what you're asking
I
of.
think any judge who's not part of the team so that they're an impartial judge.
Again, like a part of a team or a part of the two teams that are
If we were
debating?
hiring judges, is it easier for Blake Longfellow to place a hired judge during the week or on the weekend?
I don't know.
I think it's almost certainly on the weekend, right? Like,
We hire judges on Thursdays every 2 weeks at my job.
and on the
I don't know.
weekends.
We do it online. I don't know if it would be
Oh well,
harder to do it in
online. I mean,
person.
that's a whole other thing, right? Because during the week, like with the travel and whatnot, where and most forensics takes place in person, like that's what Blake, from all my conversations with Blake, and obviously maybe he said something different here or whatever. Like the problem he's bearing down against now is placing people based on travel, right?
Yeah.
Because it's hard to justify going here or there or whatever as far as like two different tournaments. And I think during the week that's even harder, man. Like I think it's harder to set that up so that someone's like, I went to work all day, till 4 or 5, and now I'm gonna go judge 2 rounds of a debate tournament for $40.
Okay, so you get kids from a third school to go. I mean, like we're the thing that drives me crazy about forensics is we talk about these problems that no other activity has. Like basketball exists in every school. Every school has basketball, and they have weekday after school games all the time. And forensics has the metrics and the outcomes to support students, dare I say it, more than the average basketball team supports their students, and it does things for them more than these basketball teams do, right? But it helps them more academically. Like it's just by every outcome you want a significant activity, but there are so many schools that want to do forensics, but forensics doesn't work for them. And I don't understand that. And I don't understand how, like, we keep talking about certain, it's like, it's like that Onion article, like, no way to prevent this, said
Yeah, only country in the world.
basically
Yeah.
only country in the world that has this problem. Like, how are we the only activity in the world that has this problem? Right? Like, basketball is referees. Well, how do they do it? How does a
They
Tuesday
charge a bunch
after?
of fees, and then they have the referees be paid.
Okay, sure. We charge fees and have referees be paid. But
Sure.
it just doesn't make sense to, like, have an activity where the minimum commitment is months of prep, and the minimum, like, uh participation is 4 to 6 rounds of a tournament. I mean, that's just too big a buy-in. And you have to, like, hire staff that already know how to do this, and that's really difficult to do. Like, think about how hiring judges is really difficult. Hiring coaches is really difficult. And I think our current existing model necessitates experienced coaches for a school to begin to do debate. I mean, like, there's ways of trying to get around that. Like, this YouTube channel, part of our goal is to help programs that don't have experienced coaches. But right now, you kind of can't do debate if you don't have
I
experienced coaches.
I think on there's two things I'm kind of taking from this I want to touch on. So one, skipping back to like the referee thing, right? Like, how do we get
Yeah.
referees? One referee at a youth basketball game covers 10, 15 kids.
Yeah.
One umpire at a baseball game covers 20 kids.
Right.
Two line judges in soccer cover, however, blah 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 blah, right?
Sure.
And so I think that fundamentally is a different problem, right? Because we can only have one person judge one debate at a time.
Not
And
unless
so
we limit the amount of debates that are happening.
how does that change whether we can have one person judge one debate at a time? One
Because if
person
it's a
cannot judge.
5-on-5 debate, that's a 1-to-10 ratio for a judge.
Sure, if you want to have 5-on-5 debates, then yes, we could do that, but that's not part of your proposal.
It's not part of my proposal. My proposal is that we get 2 judges per event. So
Sure.
it's not
But,
the
but
same.
yeah,
Yeah.
but even then, right? Like, it's probably less than. I'm just trying to talk about like the scalability and logistics of basketball, right? Like, if a basketball court exists and kids know how to dribble and shoot a ball, no matter how bad they are, there is admittedly a level of basketball they can play, and like you can get a referee or whatever, right? And those fees go into like playing like American youth basketball organizations, American youth soccer organizations like AISO or whatever, all that kind of stuff. But my second thing is that I think that debate, part of the challenge with debate, is that it's skilled work. Like, a lot of it is just skilled work because, like, there's like, it's almost like learning another language to play the game. You know what I mean? And like, obviously, you can have formats where that's less of a factor to a certain degree, right? But it feels like, for instance, I feel confident that I could go coach a little league baseball team.
Yeah.
I'm good enough at baseball and know enough about baseball to do that.
Yeah.
And I don't think just about any little league baseball coach could coach debate like day one without extensive, like, without doing work beforehand, without watching Proteus or reading a book, whatever. But I could coach baseball for sure today. No books, no whatever, right? And maybe that's because it's a cultural thing. Maybe it's because the games are different, or whatever it may be. But I think that is a challenge that is posed when it comes to debate. If, and I think this does matter and is not something necessarily, well, I don't know that your thing doesn't account for it, but I think it's relevant. I think that in debate, people want to be successful, for lack of a better word,
Hmm.
because I almost think that in a team sport, and obviously debate can be a team like 2-on-2 or whatever. It could be 3-on-3, whatever. You could do 5-on-5. Who cares? But in debate, in its manifestation as of now, the biggest size debates I know are 3-on-3 or 3-on-3-on-3 technically. But mostly they're 2-on-2, 1-on-1. In debate, when you lose, it's almost always kind of your fault directly, right? And like that can feel bad and personal because it's not even just like, oh, you lost. It's like, oh, you're just bad at thinking. Your understanding of the world and the way you speak and dress and whatever is bad. Whereas in basketball or baseball, like I loved baseball as a kid. I was on a team one time that won 2 games, right? 2 out of like 20. And it was still fun because baseball's really fun and blah, blah, blah. Debate is not fun when you're losing unless you fucking love debate. Debate is awful when you're losing.
Yeah.
And I think that part of why we have larger tournaments, hopefully, is for the sake of like variance things, right? And like, okay, well, if you get 4 rounds, there's a chance that a 2-2 breaks or a 3-1 breaks instead of having to go 4-0 or whatever. And I understand your idea of like building into an end of season thing. But my concern there is almost like, and this is something you and me talked about the other day or whatever. Like, I find it hard to imagine a world where the incentive structure of this format of debate or whatever, and with whatever national organization would do it, convinces like a Berkeley to go do a scrimmage with Modesto or with whatever, some community college that's not necessarily like a top competitive level community college, because and the answer to that is, well, yeah, but we incentivize them to. It's like, well, what you're incentivizing them to do is go do some other format of debate where they get to debate against the other best teams and bring as many kids as they want and pay for as many judges as they want and blah 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 blah. And I guess I worry that my concern with this format of debate, and it's not a concern, and maybe that it's a good thing, and obviously there's still some issues with it, but it seems like this format is purely targeted at like onboarding people who don't do debate into debate. And I think the issue with that is all the people who do debate won't be interested in it and have these alternative competing things. If that makes sense.
I think that there's 2 different things to get at, right? Which is this question of like focusing on, like, let's say the new Tekken game, right? Focusing on like bringing in a bigger casual audience versus like maintaining the like hardcore crowd. And like, why would a serious fighting game fan want a game that appeals to a casual audience, right? That is something that I want to get into, and I think it's interesting. But I think there's other stuff you said that what was it that you were just talking about?
I talked about big teams wouldn't want to do this. You'd have to incentivize them more. I talked about how like baseball, skilled knowledge. I don't know.
Yes, that's what I wanted to talk about. So right now, my job, right? The BDL, we do a lot of things, and we are a nonprofit that has a million different projects that I'm a part of. But one of the things that we are trying to do is address the fact that nearly every high school in New York that we talk to wants to have a speech and debate program, but doesn't. And the current model of how they get a speech and debate program is untenable at that scale. So I think that is a fundamental problem with an activity where you have a large audience of people wanting to do it, and them doing it would make the activity better, but the barrier to entry is too high. I think it would be one thing if it was like, oh, if every school in New York was doing debate, then debate would suffer as a result, right? But that's not true, right? Like, debate tournaments are better when more teams are there. And I think our forensics experience when we were starting out, and there were 3 times the number of entries at tournaments, maybe 4 times the number of entries at tournaments, Um, I think that was better, right? I think we know that the activity, what it looks like with higher numbers of entries, and we know that that is good. And I think there might be like individual tournaments that still have a lot of people entered. I don't know what's accounting for that, but what I can tell you is that I live in one of the biggest cities in the world. Most of the schools here want to do debate and they can't, right? So at a very fundamental level, I think that is something that we should be addressing as an activity. The other aspect of it is that I think we are trying to like work around certain problems rather than fix the problems. And one example of that is that there is no reason why a good history teacher shouldn't be able to be a debate coach, or a good English teacher who teaches argumentative writing shouldn't be able to be a good debate coach. The only reason why that's not true is because we have all of this like artificial difficulty in debate, where you and I know that good debaters are not smarter people than people who can't wrap their heads around debate, right? We've coached many, many people who were brilliant, but just struggled with this kind of format and the sort of whatever. And if they just understood how to convey their ideas, how to engage in the actual discourse, they would be killing it. They would be doing great. But they first have to go through this awkward phase where they just learn the nuances of this activity, right? I think that is a more important thing to fix. And similarly, your idea of like debate is an activity that is just feels horrible to lose. Like if you and I were designing a video game and we said, "Oh, the game's only fun if you win. It's horrible to play if you're losing." I think the solution will make everyone play 6 games so that odds are everyone wins at least once is it's just not fixing the issue, right? It's like a really terrible band-aid for the actual issue. And I think if we are saying that this activity just inherently is time consuming, needs to be the only extracurricular you're doing, is expensive, and anytime you're not winning, it's horrible, I think that is a horrible pitch for our activity. And I think if there is a fix for those problems, that fix also opens the door to a bunch of other cool stuff that currently aren't working because of inherent problems with the design and culture of our activity.
Do you perceive speech as having this problem?
That is a really, really good question. I think the problem with speech, no, I don't think speech is having this problem. I think the reason speech is having a problem is because the demand for speech is so much lower than the demand for debate. If you talk to these schools, we would love to start speech programs for them, right?
I mean, it's what
Because
Blake always says, like everyone hears speech and debate and they really just hear debate.
yep.
Even though there are 11 events that are actually speech and only a few of them are debate.
The hand gesture was also perfect.
Yeah.
But you know, that's real, man. Like we've talked to schools and been like we're doing a survey course right now. We're piloting it, and the idea is the model that we're trying out right now for what we do is your school pays us to come in, and I teach your kids debate for 8 weeks. And I teach them all sorts of different debate stuff, but you have 2 of your own teachers sitting in on those classes.
So that they can learn, yeah.
And then the idea is after those 8 weeks, okay, you have an idea. We've done a survey. You're like, do I like prep debate? Do I like whatever? And then after that, if your school wants to continue, now your teachers are running it and I'm teaching the teachers and I'm giving them
So,
feedback on how
so
they're
let
running
me
it.
ask this because I
But sorry,
think
let me
that's.
just add this one last note
Go
on
ahead.
there.
Yeah.
We didn't include speech on any of it. Like I wanted to, and I think it makes sense. Like we taught a lot of summer classes that are meant for new like kids coming in. And sure, have them do impromptu. It's easy, it's fun to whatever. There's just no interest from these schools in competitive acting. I think it's sick, but it's just not the same. Like there is massive demand for debate. There isn't much demand for speech.
We have
But
better PR for sure. Um,
yeah,
so I have a few thoughts on that. Number one is I think the solution of experienced debate coaches teaching high school teachers to coach debate is a phenomenal solution,
thank you.
right? Like
Yeah,
independent of like tournament structure stuff,
yeah,
because I what could this is actually a point I wanted to make. Like eventually, I think that you're certainly right that like there's not a big disad to having a separate formatted debate that onboards people into debate and lets them get a little taste. There's not like a big disad to that. I think there are some problems with like the judging stuff, but that can be resolved. Like you can work around all that stuff, right? But I think the fundamental problem is I don't think, and maybe I'm wrong, so I don't want to assign intent to you. I don't think your goal is that, and that's what those kids will do forever. I think your goal is, and that will feed into LD and Parley and like current models of debate, which are like not necessarily technical, but are like, I don't know, rigorous would be a word I'd use, like, meritorious, like significantly invested in the competitive edge and blah, 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 blah. Because it almost sounds like what you're saying to me is well, okay, let me just make a personal statement, I suppose.
yeah,
um I like debate, and I like the kinds of debate that we do, and there's even I think a slightly lesser version of the current debate we do where I'd still be interested, but I would say 100% there is a line where if debate was not this competitive and academically rigorous and meritorious thing, I'm out. I'd just be out. I'd just be doing something else, right? Because
yeah,
that's part of the juice for me, right? And what I'm trying to say is that what it sounds like you'd create could be really big, could be this cool, like quote unquote. I mean, it is debate, but I'd say like debate, current debate, modern debate adjacent activity. I wouldn't give a shit about that. I wouldn't care if there's a million kids in the United States doing that, because if it doesn't actually result in the things I like about debate, or the formats or whatever you want to say, styles, etc.,
yeah.
being bigger, why do I care? It's like Model UN accomplishes a lot of things and all that stuff,
Yeah.
but I don't care about it. Toastmasters accomplishes a lot of things. I don't care about it, right?
You're
Because
right, but I think I disagree that the idea is, or yeah, not disagree. You're asking whether this is my intent, and my intent is not to feed current existing models, but I also don't want this to be a like what and you know me, right? And you know what I like about debate also, and like I think what makes debate is it's highly analytic, and it's I love the depth of analysis, and I love how much of a pure strategy game it is. um I love the strategy, I love the level of analysis, but I feel like in the current existing models of debate, strategy and analysis are not controlling enough of the outcome. I think there's a lot of like, especially at the beginning levels, right? Um, People are winning or losing not based on the strength of their analysis. And that's how you end up with like, I don't know, like novice teams reading T or K or whatever, which there's
sure,
nothing wrong with that, but They don't need to have strong analysis to beat somebody who just doesn't understand what a counterplan is and you read a counterplan, you know?
Do you see a meaningful difference between that though and people who are like good at speaking? Because something I kind of think is that like I don't think I think there's a lot of speech people who are like debate's bad because it's not actually communicating or whatever. But I think it's just as like, for lack of a better word, like arbitrary for a day one novice to win debates where the other team is, you know, more analytical or whatever, but aren't good speakers. Not I'm not even saying like spreading, but they're just not
Yeah.
they're and this other
Yeah.
kid is making dog shit arguments, but is
Yeah.
good at talking. And I think like those are opposite sides of the coin to me, where I'm like, with you, dude. It's strategy. It's a strategy game. It's a beautiful strategy game with different tactics and styles and all that kind of stuff. And I think both the hyper technical fixation on speed and drops and blah 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 on the flow, and the whoever talks prettiest wins are both stupid.
I agree. And I think these problems exist because the events are poorly designed, right? I mean, I made that whole game design video on it,
Yeah.
right? And it's frustrating because so many new events were made with the idea of, well, then this will become the new standard. And now there's just, yeah, there's an XKCD comic about this. It's like there's 16 programming languages, and they all have their
I've
own.
seen that with standards. Yeah, standards.
Yeah. It's they're like, why are there 16 standards? Like, we should make one that does all of this, and now there's 17 standards. Yeah. But the problem, I think, has been that people haven't taken any thought into game design when they've made the next event. That's always been modeling after something, and then they don't really understand where the problems in the previous game's design came from. They just made a new game and said, okay, new game, don't do that. Like, people say, like, there's no theory in IPDA. What does that mean? Like, someone's not capable of saying those words and a judge isn't capable of voting for it?
There's been a lot of discussion. I don't know if you've seen the post on Reddit the other day about someone talking about Prague and PF. And they're like, I just don't get why this even makes sense. Like, why would me not disclosing mean my arguments weren't better than yours?
Sure, right? But the idea is that the disclosure arguments, like, they can be made. And if a judge has a propensity to vote for it, they will. And I think you have to find a way around that. And so I still have some foolish hope that I can, like, design the first good debate game, right? And I don't know that this thing that I talked about it is that, right? But I think, like, for example, I was talking about this new LD topic yesterday. And it's about term limits for Supreme Court justices. And the kids that I'm teaching are starting to kind of, like, get debate a little bit and, you know, kind of understand advantage structure a little bit. And they're starting to, like, I can kind of, like, start peeling back the veneer of, like, strategy versus just a bunch of stuff. And, you know, like, yesterday, the big takeaway I had is, like, what is the strategy for the affirmative and the strategy for the negative, right? The strategy for the what?
Term limit.
What else?
Does it mean number of term limits or does it mean length of term limits?
That's
the classic one I've seen. It's like what dissent do you get because of this?
I know. Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
No, you were unclear. Vagueness.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. What would you run on the neg if you can't run counterplans, theory, case?
It was Supreme Court term limits.
Yeah. So the model that people are assuming will happen because it's a bad topic with bad topic writers, one of whom I would love to interview one day, even though in every video I say these topics are terrible. I know smart, experienced people are on these panels, so I don't know why the topics end up this way. But anyway, the model people are assuming is
real quick. I want to cut in so we get this on the record. So Tanya graduating Wiki.
Yeah.
Not this year and not next year, but most years. Chad, her coach, the head of debate at Western Kentucky, is on the topic panel. And Chad has been a part of, like, when I think of the last 9 topics, like,
the six best, like Chad's been a big part of.
we've
I
talked
think
about
we
this
should
before.
really
I'd
try
love to have him
and
on
get
here.
Chad and just act, because he, from my understanding, and I've never talked to, we talked to Chad a little bit, but not like a ton. From Tanya's description, I was like, why is Chad not going to be on it next year? And she goes, because it's awful. It's awful to be a part of the topic writing committee, and it's so like, yeah. And so anyway,
yeah, and you know, the topic writing committee are human beings with feelings who probably aren't getting paid to be on the topic writing committee.
Absolutely not.
Right. So I'm not trying to just like talk shit, but there's clearly problems, and we can't fix the problems unless we look at them, right? What was I saying a second ago about
Supreme Court term limits, blah blah blah, blah, all that stuff.
Yeah. So, well, I'll tell you what my strategy was, which is just to say, on the AF, it's try or die. Like, the situation right now sucks. I don't know what to tell you. Like, faith in the Supreme Court is really, really low, and we know doing nothing is gonna be terrible. So, let's try term limits. There's reasons to think it'll succeed, right? Obviously, that's not like the text of all the arguments, but the overall strategy is that. On the negative, you read like, no, term limits are going to politicize it more, and that's going to hurt whatever. But that's really just to like answer the predictable advantage. And the second disad is business confidence.
I think you trick them when you read. If you're the Av, I think you trick them and you defend the squo. I think you set term limits. I think you set term limits as 100 years, and then you say the current system is the best it could be.
Yeah, that's a great way.
As a one-off, at least, because if they're not going to prep you out, what's their disad? They don't have a disad because they're not ready to defend. You know, like they're gonna read their AF.
And they're not gonna read T.
Yeah, they're gonna read their AF, bro. Like, anyways.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
I know. No, so then you just read like BizCon, like, or like investor confidence. Who's gonna invest in a technology that they don't know is gonna be legal in 2 years? Like, but anyway, but the reason I bring that up is because like that level, what we just did, right? That level of thinking about how these arguments interact and what the strategy is and whatever. One, I think that's really fun. It's my favorite thing about debate. But two, I think it's uniquely a debate exercise, right? It's not just Toastmasters. It's not just talking. It's not Model UN. It is uniquely a skill set you develop through this activity. And it's a really valuable skill set. I use it all the time. You use it all the time, right? I think stuff like, I don't know, the difference between like Kondo and Dispo or whatever, like, I don't know. These are parts of the game, and there are inherent consequences of the level of analysis and strategic thinking. So I guess even those aren't good examples, but just like the spreading and all the stuff that you're reading your framework arguments on, right? The question is like, how do we make a game that is challenging and is competitive and is analytic and has all of that stuff, but where you don't need to read framework against arguments that you don't want in the debate, and that those arguments are just disincentivized through the structure of the activity itself. Because then I think the goal just becomes get a bunch of people into that, as long as it functions this way in the higher level.
There's a lot of, so I want to bring up a Ryan Guy thing, because this is really important. I think I know I'll forget this. I had this discussion with Ryan Guy at State this year, because it was about disclosure stuff. And I was like, hey, we're the only team that's disclosed yet again. What a disadvantage for DVC, blah, 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 blah. You know, what's, like, is this going to be, will a protest be allowed based on this and blah, 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 blah. Like, if we read disclosure, can a team protest that, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And Ryan Guy's stance is, I want debates decided in the debate. He's like, I don't want the tab room to ever make a decision that decides who wins or who loses a debate. And that couldn't be further from my opinion on debate, because I think the only way to solve
a lot of what you're saying as far as the incentives and structures is to say like hard, because even NFA, when they had the rule, they said we discourage a rapid or spread style delivery and encourage you to drop debaters who do so. No. Debaters must be dropped if they are spreading. If your judge does not do this, this is a protestable thing, and the tab room is encouraged to overturn said decision.
Yeah.
And if people don't want to do that format of debate, cool. That debate can be small and suck. But like, either be about it or don't, bro. What is this like nonsense? Like, we want to be on the record that we discourage this. It's not
Yeah, and I think a really big problem right now, like we are like I told you, we're teaching teachers how to coach debate. Well, what event do we coach them in? And a big problem that we're facing is...
Bro, we should do a workshop.
Yeah, I mean, do you want to
Like,
do one this summer?
Obviously the thing is, this summer, because of the stuff going on, whatever, might be hard for me. But I think it'd be so cool to come. Obviously, you kind of already do this professionally, whatever. But for me to come out to New York and like announce ahead of time, blah blah blah, try and get it out there, like, hey, we're gonna just do like a thing for teachers to learn, like a boot camp. Even in like, I mean, obviously you do 8 weeks right now, but like 2 days.
Yeah,
it's gonna be all day, 2 days. Do it out here too.
Literally,
like go to all the local high schools. We will teach your people how to do debate, the logistics of it. We will get you in touch with the organizations like the what is it, the Coastal League, CGS.
We're literally offering a 1-week camp for like prospective coaches at our summer.
It's just so important. Like, yeah, once you mentioned that earlier, I'm like, yeah, man, like that really is kind of the ticket, because you know, and Shaw has tried to do this because Shaw cares so much about saving like readers theater, and Shaw has done the same thing. Shaw's come up to NorCal and been like, look, I will just show you how you do this. It's not as hard as you think. And
he coached my readers theater that competed against his school.
Can I? So I don't want to distract, but just note on this. Maybe we'll do a video on it later. Duo's been struggling. Duo's been struggling big time. Not a lot of duo entries. And this year at State and Fire Pi, Shaw got a bylaw passed to increase the amount of points, the sweepstakes points for duo.
Yeah.
As like a means of incentivizing. And I don't know if that's going to work, but I think that's an interesting...
I mean, it depends on how busy Robert Hawkins is, but if...
Well, that's what we got. That's what I told Rob. I'm like, oh man, I think this is so lame. And he goes, do you know who I am?
Yeah.
He's like, they're going to give Duo more points.
Has the hunger next year.
Yeah. It's going to be great.
Yeah. You guys are going to turn into a duo squad.
Yeah. Well, I was like, it's going to be Duo and Parley. Duo and LD.
Yeah,
like,
what's crazy is that
you can be double entered in Duo now too, bro. You can do 2 duos that are worth twice as many points as a regular speech.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean...
Duo, Parley, LD. That's your 4 events. Yeah. Everyone.
Yeah.
1.5, 2.0, 2.0, 2.0.
Yeah, I mean, Parley shakes out to be 1 per student, but still.
I wish you had been. I'm so sorry we're going to derail, but it's just whatever, funny stuff. Business meeting, State. This comes up, and they're saying, like, we want Duo to be church increase. It's the only event that is 2 people, and it's not worth double points. It's only worth 1.5. Doesn't make any sense.
That's not true.
Because so...
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying. Yeah.
It is true. So, with that said, and basically people are talking about it, and someone goes, I challenge anyone to explain why, with as much work as Duo is, it should only be worth 1.5. And no one's saying anything, and I turn to Twee, because Twee was president, and I go, I'll take a shot at it. I was like, Lincoln Douglas debate is by such a margin the most work event at this tournament. More than RT, I promise you. Anything. Like, and it's 1.5. So yes, it's only 1 person, but if the justification we're going to use is it's more work to do a duo, nah. Tell you what, bro, this
you've
is
done Duo. We
didn't go to Fire this year, and 4 or 5 teams broke in LD. In the Firo, the last 3 states we've been to, and Firo, the last 2 Firos, 3 people have broken. Period. That weren't us, bro. Like, can you just tell me the works more? Anyway, go ahead. Sorry, you just sidetrack.
No, that's it.
But the reason I wanted to mention that is because when you talk about like incentivizing stuff via your tournament structure or your organizational structure, obviously there is some precedent for people thinking maybe that is how you do things. Like, how do we encourage people to do Duo all year? We say that at Fire Pi it's going to be worth more. We say that at State it's going to be worth more.
Yeah, anyway. I mean, yeah, and I mean, ultimately, I think what I want is a debate activity that is easy to enter, like Tekken, right? You can button mash in Tekken, and once you like it, you're like, what do I have to do to get good? And the more competitive Tekken appeals to somebody, or like League of Legends, right? Like, do people who play League of Legends want to be good League of Legends players, right? I think right now we have debate where so much of the debate community does not want to be in the out rounds of the TOC, right? It doesn't appeal to them. And I don't think an NPTE or a TOC is sustainable without a large base of people who are interested in going there, right? I mean, how many NPTE teams were there? 16?
I don't even know if there were 16. There might have been 11 or 12 this year. This year was
Yeah,
really
12.
low. MPDA was much bigger, but yeah.
Sure, like the
But
point
even
of the
still, it was small
NPTE is
historically.
that it's the top 64 teams in the country.
32.
I
Actually,
thought they increased it.
no.
Or they increased it to 32?
Yeah, I think it used to
Whatever.
be 24, but yeah, or 20.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
So the whole point of it is that it's the top 32, but there's only 12 who are interested in going. So in theory, anyone who wanted to go to the NPTE could have, right?
This year, I think there were a number of issues this year that made it challenging, but the only one that I'll comment on here that is relevant is that NPTE got put on the same days as AFA. And so there were
I
programs.
understand, but that's still like, in order for your tournament to be a top 32 and for to have that mean anything, there have to be 200 people that would like to go there if they could.
Yeah.
I think it doesn't make sense to say we are the top 32 and we are struggling to find 32 interested people.
That's true.
And so I think that's kind of what these like championship tournaments, like what they benefit from a bigger playing pool, right? Is it just has to be that the like technical high level stuff and the stuff that people are casually interested in are in some way compatible as
Why
the
does
same activity.
I just wonder? I mean, obviously they have a problem, but not nearly the same. Why does policy not have this problem? Is it because they're just like honest up front about what policy is? Because
Probably.
policy is way more work than Parley, I would say. It is as high, if not some would say significantly higher level, and it's way bigger. But it's also maybe it's just it has a kind of institutional support, like because it's so old and whatnot. Like it's like the original.
Well, and you don't
format,
get
but it's
any choices. Any organization that does policy only does policy.
Pretty much,
and will
yeah.
never expose you to anything else. There's no events going on at the tournament that aren't policy, like the Urban Debate League is only policy. They will only deal with organizations that do policy. They don't want to mix and match it all, and I think it's working for them, I assume.
That's one of those things, man, where it's like I think potentially just drawing a hard line on stuff and is something debate and mainly debate, not so much speech. Let's say speech and debate, I guess. Don't want to do. I don't think most debate formats or debate organizations are willing to just draw a hard line. This is a conversation I was kind of having at the NPDA like business meeting and stuff, where I was like, look, as a community, like obviously I can coach at the highest level. You're champions. Anyway, obviously I can coach at the highest level, but I'm a community college, bro. And if I wasn't, there's 2 community colleges that have really, I don't want to say 2. There's 3. There are 3 community colleges that have high level Parley coaches, as far as I'm concerned. I'm not trying to be dismissive, but I mean like highest level, right? Like could go to the MPTE and break level coaches. And every other community college, just there were more, as I said, there were more entries in Parley at state than there were at NPDA. And if not, it was close. But I was in this business meeting and I was like, can someone in this room tell me what you're going to do to get the 36 kids who competed in Parley 2 weeks ago in this state to come to this tournament? Because if you're not going to do that, I don't really care about what the rest of your solutions are. And no one seemed to care, bro. Like there's some minor like whatever, like yeah, we hear you, but like they don't want to say it out loud, you know what I mean, or like be firm about it. But they're like, we would. What I actually said was, it sounds to me like everyone in this room would rather Parley die and stay the way it is than have to make some concessions and make it more accessible to community colleges. And I think that's a big concern, right? You know, and it's we I don't know how much. I mean, you know, but and we haven't talked about this since there's been a video. Every single round, except for against community colleges, my kids read community college K. Basically, read a K saying like, look, Parley is dying, and we think the number one driving factor of that is that technical debate is forcing out community colleges, and there was no prioritization of the inclusion of community college students in this space. And all weekend, I'm just hearing people who have who don't run programs first and foremost, who aren't administrative, who never went to a community college, who've done nothing ever to try and bolster community college participation, tell us how you're just so wrong. It's funding. It's COVID. It's this. It's that. And it's like, well, so why was it happening? Like, because Conrad Hack posted all this data that, like, dude, it's 15 or 13 of the last 15 years, participation's gone down. It's COVID. Fucking grow up. It's COVID. Like,
Dude,
well, you know, all these programs just lost funding. Okay, but then how come Washburn and SIU and Lewis and Clark, who have a combined 9 national titles in Parley, left and
bro,
are doing other formats of debate that are more expensive to do?
it's never not funding,
Of course.
but the BDL raised $1.5 million, and we have a million problems.
I was in the
Like,
tab. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, that's it. I think a lot of people will be like, well, if we had funding, we'd figure it out, right? There's so many other hard limiting factors, right? Like,
Bro,
let's say
staff will eat up $1 million if you have 15 people in a year. And they're
15
paid.
people. Dude, after yeah, like after like a full year salary and benefits and whatever, each person's like $90,000-$100,000, and like, how are you making that money back on spending?
I was
Yeah,
getting into so I did this in the business meeting and then the tab room. And when all those people were going in, I said, bro, what a coincidence that the things that are killing Parley are all the things we can do nothing about. How unlucky are we that like all the things we could change won't fix
they're not an
anything?
issue.
It's
But
just the
it's also,
thing.
but it's just, yeah, it's like we have this summer camp coming up, right? Um, in theory, in practice, money is definitely an issue. But in theory, let's say hypothetically, right? Money's not an issue. The space isn't an issue. We talked to a college, they gave us the space. We're having Malcolm Gladwell come speak. We have access to, like, let's just take like people I personally know, right? And who I could ask a question, regardless of what their answer is, right? I personally know you, Tanya, PyCap national champion, Brenna and Tristan, MPTE, MPDA national champions,
Top speakers.
Robert Hawkins,
AFA
all
national
of these
champion,
people, right?
Blake, 9-time national champion.
Right. I have access to all of these people, all of this, like, forget who Deco can call in, right? Like, Deco can call in Elliot Page
I
to
was gonna
show
say
up.
fucking Samuel Jackson or some shit, probably. But
Yeah, right. So, but the I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but whatever. But the question is, like, how do you make a debate camp out of that? Like, there's so many other problems. Like, how do we find kids who are interested? How do we get more kids interested in this activity? And then the more money you have, the more you just bash your head at the wall at how many problems are being ignored with this activity and with the communities in it and with the structures in it. And everybody only talks about budget. Like, dude, we could throw an invitational and make it free for everybody and ask them, what events do you want us to run? And no one would show up. Like, there's other problems here other than COVID and money.
I
And
think College Parley, and maybe all of College Debate, but especially College Parley, has to address the filter problem that occurs at the high school level. Because
all of college
California
forensics needs to, yes.
California has a massive, massive high school parley scene, but it's
Yeah.
basically the only state that does. And if parley was done nationally, I think parley would not be dying at all. I think there is, for parley specifically, this great, great filter where a kid has to decide they still do want to debate, which is 1 in 10.
Yeah.
Would you say 1 in 10 of the high school competitors, maybe 1 in 10 go on to compete in college?
Maybe.
Probably less.
I would say it's not more than 10.
And they have to be convinced that they should do Parley, an event that is not even offered in 48 states or whatever,
Yeah.
over Lincoln Douglas, which exists at the high school and college level, even though they're different, Policy, which exists at the high school level, Congress is starting to exist, Public Forum is starting to exist, World School exists, like all of these things.
Yeah.
They have to pick Parley over all of those things, even though they have no familiarity with it. And like, dude, I don't like. This might sound like I don't know. Correct me if this statement sounds completely stupid and ridiculous and exaggerated. I have no idea. I really don't. But that's partially because I don't see anything, which leads me to believe this. Are we Parley's biggest ambassadors to the high school community?
You and I?
Yeah. Like, do
Is
you
there
think
another ambassador?
that's what I'm trying to say?
Right. I'm
Like, and
saying,
obviously, I don't think like, oh, it's fucking
like-
title. But what I'm trying, who is out there telling high school students, as
that
many high
Parley
school students
exists.
that Parley exists and they should do it and it's good? I don't know who they are. We don't have a table at like NSDA or anything, bro. We don't do anything really, and so all of that, and so that's crazy, bro. Because we're not big. Like, we're not trying to say like, oh, we're the biggest because we're massive. We have 900 followers and we're the biggest, bro. We're big
I
enough
would
that
say
every
we-
tournament you and me go to, every tournament, high school and college, someone comes up to us to ask us about Proteus.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. That's the thing. Like, we don't have nearly as much of a platform as so many of these other organizations have the potential to. But let's talk about Parley for a second. This is completely separate, and maybe we don't put these videos out at all. Maybe we segment it into 15 different videos. I don't know. But how much time do you have? What time?
I've got about 30 minutes.
I don't think we have enough time to do this draft thing, but I do want to.
We'll
get
do that
your
later.
take.
It's all good.
I want to
I'm
get your
on
take
paternity
on
leave,
this
so whenever
Parley
you're free.
situation.
Yeah.
So the situation is that we are one of the projects we're taking on as a nonprofit is we are
The BDL, to be clear, not Proteus.
That's right. Yes, the Brooklyn Debate League, which I work for. We are one of the ways that we're trying to build up debate in New York is by helping start new programs. And the major theory that we are working with right now, is that the most effective way of doing that is, instead of trying to find a bunch of coaches and send them to a bunch of schools, you instead go to schools that have motivated, talented, brilliant teachers, and then just teach them how to do debate, right? It's the Armageddon thing, where it's like, it's
the
probably,
astronauts drilling. Yeah.
yeah, it's probably easier to teach an astronaut how to drill than it is to train a miner to be an astronaut. And so my year in New York has been tough, because I've been in a lot of classrooms and I've been learning how to be like a good high school teacher, which is very difficult. It is a lot more difficult than coaching debate. It doesn't matter what grade level you teach at in New York, you need a master's degree, and like additional training on top of that. And especially with the demographics that we work with, like, I don't know, I have students that have problems in their lives that I just didn't know anyone personally growing up that had those problems. And we have teachers at these schools that are so experienced in working with that student body and have so much trust from their existing student body that the idea that some 19, 20-year-old college kid could go in and teach debate as effectively and develop a sustainable program that's going to exist in 10 years is just not going to work. The only way you're going to build these sustainable programs is by having the teachers there do it. And the lucky thing is, every New York school is trying to build up their after school activities. Everyone is interested in debate. Like, the metrics are really encouraging, the scholarships are there, everything is great, right? So the position we're in now, the position I'm in, I write the curriculum. My job is I decide what students learn about debate and how they are taught that. And this year I'm piloting it by going to 4 or 5 schools and teaching at those schools. But moving forward, it's going to be, as we're trying to scale up, is going to be me training the people who then go and train other people, right? So there's a lot of stuff that I tackle and chew on and whatever. But the most basic challenge that we have right now that I want to get your take on is events. So, and this is something that we just learn about as we go. Every week we have like 3 meetings, and like all I do is meetings. But we decided to make a survey course where the idea is, over the course of 8 weeks, your students will learn about and do online scrimmages in 3 different formats of debate. So it's like an intro week, then 2 weeks of learning format 1, online scrimmage, 2 weeks of format 2, online scrimmage, 2 weeks of format 3, online scrimmage, and then 1 little week tacked on at the end there to wrap everything up. And then we have 1 in-person tournament that is, we haven't decided whether it's like 1 round of each format or each student gets to choose whatever they want to do. But the idea behind that was that we are giving you a taste of something resembling limited prep debate, something resembling Congress, something resembling evidentiary debate like an LD or PF. And at the end of that, your students and your would-be coach, they all kind of decide what's the most exciting for them and what is it that they want to do and whatever. And from there, they start in the fall by basically having a Lincoln Douglas team or a public forum team or whatever, and then we support them. The basic challenge is that multiple formats for a starting program, especially where you have no experienced competitors on the team, you have no real experienced coaches, and high school forensics doesn't support double entries. Like, you could double enter in like HI and like prose or whatever, maybe. They don't call it prose. Dramatic interp or something. I don't know. POI. Sure. But you can't do 2 formats of debate. There's a school that I go to sometimes to help them out. It's a massive school in Manhattan, and they have a 300-person debate team. And the LDers have never spoken to the Parley kids. They just don't know each other. They have different practice schedules. They have different coaches. Sometimes they'll see each other at tournaments, and they never speak to the extempors, right? And so they might have different tournament schedules, like what tournaments they go to. So it seems to be that a choice has to be made, that a program that is starting can change their debate format later, but they have to start in one. So that's the first basic part of the problem is what event do they do? So our first approach is to just give them a bunch of options and let them choose, but like which of them are actually viable? Like how viable is Lincoln Douglas with its 1-to-2 judge ratio? It's a more expensive activity. It is one where you have more like work required from the students. We've been focusing on LD this year, but like, is that viable? I think Congress is every speech coach's favorite debate event. Like Blake loves Congress. Why? Because it has like an 8-to-1 judge ratio, 12-to-1 judge ratio. But I have been trying to push
One
back.
second, I'm about to turn off my camera for a second.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I'll wait. This is a very exciting bit for the audience at home. I'm going
we're
to.
good.
Oh, we're back. Okay, great. I've been trying to like hold off because it would have just been Congress if I wasn't here. They would have just gone. Congress allows you to enter as many kids or as few kids as you want. It's debate. You just have the one teacher show up because it has like an insane judging ratio, and that's it. We're a Congress company now. And the thing is that Congress doesn't include any of the stuff that I think is most sick about debate. And so I've been trying to push back on that, right? Public forum is getting some. It has a massive like set of teams that participate in it. There's a lot of tournaments and kids seem to like it. The problem is that I don't know. My boss did it before when he was doing a debate team at another school, and just drama with kids starting out and they're all flakes and whatever, and you have to do prep together.
Partner formats, yeah, in general.
Yeah, and then so that's why he was like, "Fuck it, we're doing LD." So the only thing that leaves is Parley, which I think accomplishes everything that I want a debate format to do. I've said for years that every public forum debater I know that isn't crazy into, even if you are into tech and whatever, I think every public forum debater would just like Parley more. It just doesn't have any of the problems of public forum, but it accomplishes all of the things that are enjoyable about public forum. 90% of it.
Except for you can't sell briefs.
You can't what?
Can't sell briefs.
Can't that's
people
true.
Can't make money selling briefs to kids.
Right. You can't. Yeah. That's a big part of it. You can't sell briefs. The other thing is, I've realized in recent years that public forum is a very like every debate format has this niche of what they're really good at, and I would say if like there's anything that public forum debaters are like have the highest focus on, it's weighing. But the reason for that is because it's impossible to do anything else. It's really hard to get like line by line clash and like definitively say this argument like won or lost or whatever. And so you just have to weigh everything in the debate, and like it's just like this big weighing game. But whatever. So I think Parley is the sickest. I think it's so easy to get a kid to their first Parley tournament. I think you can do Parley with coach prep, without coach prep. Both of them work, So my two questions are, do you agree that Parley is the best format for the kind of thing, like a starting debate team with limited experience? And if so, what on earth do we do to make it be a viable competitive scene? Because right now, like you said, Parley only exists in one state. And that state loves it, as far as I can tell. But there's something about it that I don't even know what it is. I have to figure out exactly like why these organizations that don't do or allow Parley now like aren't doing it. In theory, we can build the community of schools that will compete in it. Like there wasn't a lot of LD in New York until this year when we started building LD programs and LD debaters in New York, and now there's enough for like tournaments to happen, and that's great. I should probably say in like Brooklyn and Queens there wasn't a lot of LD, but in theory we can create the base of people who are interested in and signing up and doing the activity. And I know that there's a bunch of schools in Manhattan that are interested in Parley. I just have to figure out like what the like organizations themselves have against Parley that they, or do they not even know there's any interest? I don't know, but I have to figure that out. But the first thing that I need is just whether you agree that Parley is the right place to start, and then we can hammer out how do you pitch that to new organizations.
Yes, I think Parley's a very good format. I think IPDA is too, but there's like the judging commitment issue, just very judging dense. I think that Parley does accomplish like everything I like about debate. I also like partner debate more than I like one-on-one debate for various strategic reasons and things. I think Parley could be scaled up to be as technical as you want and scaled down to be basically just two-person IPDA. And obviously, it's what it looks like at state and fire every year. So like proof of concept, blah 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 blah. I think as far as people don't do it, one, I think familiarity. I think it's just not that many people like. If you did PF, why would you be like, well, I know all these things about, like, I'm really good at this thing. Why go to the challenge of jumping into
Yeah,
another?
but don't think of it from a student perspective. Think of it from an
Oh no,
admin.
I mean like coaching. I mean, if
Yeah,
you're a
but
coach and you're
get that the coaches don't exist yet. We'll create the coaches.
oh
If there were enough coaches that wanted to do a particular kind of debate, then debate wouldn't be struggling in the ways that it is right now, right?
sure yeah I think organizationally though it's the same reason why people didn't want to allow IPDA in NCFA or in state, which is that, and they were right. They're like, this is going to cannibalize our LD population. Like this is going
Yeah.
to kill entries in Parley and LD, and it did. And IPDA is crushing it, and Parley and LD are smaller. And I think these people probably feel the same way about, especially if you're in public forum, bro. You're in public forum, you're the biggest event, and you're telling me there's a format of debate that, per your own admission, is very similar but better.
Yeah.
I think that's a challenge. I think people probably also associate Parley potentially because Parley, as it's done on the West Coast in California for high schools, is technical for the most part, because kind of that Berkeley influence.
Well, it's like West Coast is NPDA and East Coast is APDA.
Yeah,
And
and so
I
it's
don't
all
know,
kind of.
like, but they compete against each other, right?
What do you mean?
Like the ranking of Parley teams in the country. A lot of the top teams are West Coast teams, but like Stuyvesant is a school in Manhattan, and I know their coach. He's an APDA guy, but there's one unified high school Parley format, regardless of whether you have an APDA background coach or an NPDA background coach, right? They still compete in the same thing, right?
I'm pretty sure the rule sets are
Because
different.
APDA and NPDA have very different rules.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
But all I was gonna say is I think some people might have the association that Parley is a technical debate format, and there could be pushback based on that association because the place where it's dominant is technical. I need like 30 seconds to be right back, so just fill for 30 seconds.
I have decided that I'm gonna get a blender and I'm gonna start making my own hot sauces. And have weekly movie nights over the summer on this really big TV, where we have pizza. You know, people eat pizza and watch a movie, but also I make a batch of wings, and each week make a homemade sauce to go with that. And I'm very excited about that. I made a nice poster for the friends that I was inviting to the summer film festival. And there's a lot of good movies on that list. All of them will be presented in 4K UHD Blu-ray disc format, which is the best format for watching film. I think, if you have a good sound system, which I do. And if you are watching this, you're officially invited. Only because okay, there we go.
What
Damn.
did I miss? What? Sorry, I
If
heard
you-
invited.
Yeah, if you had gotten back 5 seconds later, I wouldn't have had to officially invite everyone watching this video to come to my house to watch movies. But now
Okay,
it's
cool.
happened.
But yeah, so I think Harley is a really good format. I think that it, I maybe
But what format of debate doesn't have that problem?
what, the onboarding problem or the?
No, it's technical.
I mean, I guess Congress, public forum.
Public
Here's my
forum
thing.
has-
Here's what I struggle with, right? I think if you don't care about strategy, it's very hard to make an argument for Parley over Congress.
But the strategy's the whole thing that gives.
And see, that's the thing. It's one of those assignment of value things. To me, dude, if I have to watch a Congress round, just put me out of my misery. Like, I hate it. It's garbage. Like, why don't I just go watch speech where the kids are better at speaking and also not making arguments? For the most part.
What is there to teach with Congress?
Eloquence, I suppose. How to pretend,
And, like-
how to LARP. Bro, Congress just is LARPing. Like, when people talk about,
Yes.
people who defend
Oh,
the
you
topic
call
are LARPing,
yourself
Congress
senator
is-
or whatever.
Yeah, it's LARPing. It's LARPing, bro. And live action roleplay for anyone who's like, what is LARPing? Yeah, and so, but it's like, does it interact with the political? Does it require research? Does it teach communication norms? Does it require you to interact with other people? Does it have good judge ratios? Yes, and yes. But there's no strategy. And I'm sure there's some strategy, and all the Congress people are losing their mind, but it's like, bro, like, there's been years where, like, the guy whose job it is, or rather the person whose job it is, to, like, decide who speaks has
Presiding
won.
officer.
Has
Yeah.
won.
Yeah,
It's like,
you
you
get
the person who
evaluated.
didn't...
Just it's its own thing, and you get it ranked. Yeah,
And that's just weird. It's like, okay, so 30 of us had one role, and this person had a different role. That's like if we were like
the
pitchers
sides
versus
don't
not
matter.
pitchers or quarterbacks. Yeah.
Like everyone, it. Congress is debate if there was only speaker points.
That's fair. Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it, which is awful. Speaker point's terrible.
And you can give speaker points for strategy, but like there is no concept of like is the AF winning?
Yeah.
Because
So bottom line,
yeah.
the only other thing I had to say was I think maybe we're just too immersed in Parley
Don't say that.
to recognize how difficult it is to get someone onboarded. Seems really easy to me. Every single year we have 3 or 4 teams at the first tournament of the year after 3 weeks of learning about debate, and most years they win that tournament or like make finals of that tournament and do pretty good. But how much of that is because they have, you in the prep room, me in the prep room, instead of someone else who doesn't know as much? But then again, you can solve that problem by saying it is student prep only, right? Or, however you do choose to address that problem, and differently to do what they want. But I guess my only point is, again, it seems super easy for me to explain all of the basics of how you get like a parliamentary debate going and whatnot. But I could see why that is a knowledge disparity other people might not have. But in a world where you're training the people to do that, why is that? I mean, I guess it'd be easier to train people to do Congress, but is it better for what debate can really give you? Like, here's my thing, and this is a really important note. I've been saying this lately. It's not like a model I invented, but it's how I've modeled debate now. All debates exist along a continuum, where one side of the continuum is like communication, essentially, and one side of the continuum is information processing. And I think what Congress lacks is essentially any information processing. And at that point, to me, it's not even really debate, right? I think all good debate formats are at least 50% information processing. And I think maybe 50% is the right number, where it's like speaking still matters, but like information processing definitely matters. But any format of debate where how pretty you talk matters more than your ability to understand and analytically respond to and perform research on an argument, to me, is not serving the broader purpose of debate.
Yeah, I
Is what
mean,
people
it's not to say that there isn't analysis and research in Congress, but it's not inherently what determines the
you might not
winner
get to
of the
speak
game.
again, bro. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like in Parley, it's designated like I will be allowed to speak and respond to your arguments for this much time at these points, and you won't be able to say a word to me. But in
Yeah.
Congress, someone can be like, "Yeah, we're not going to go ahead and give you the floor this time. We're going to give it to that other person."
Yeah. Well, so here's what I need to do, right? I need to, like, my job, like this week, maybe do yesterday, is to we have enough schools in our like corner where if we're like, hey, we think you should it just the politics of it. Next business meeting in June, right? We're gonna try to convince these organizations that we participate in to offer Parley. And I basically have to write a pitch to schools that we have a good relationship with for why they should vote for Parley. And a lot of these schools already do Congress. Um, what is the pitch? I have some ideas, but like, what to you is the pitch for like what makes Parley sick? There's the like ease of access bit, right? But I don't think that's ever going to win it on its own because Congress exists. So I think we also need some description of like what makes Parley sick strategically or whatever that isn't scary to someone who's scared of technical debate.
All right, I've got like 5 minutes, so I'm gonna try and just this is gonna have to be the last thing I say. So I'll just go through
Yeah.
a few things. Number one, I think pitch for Parley. I think Parley of all the debate formats by far does the best job regarding breadth of education and contemporary relevance of education. What I mean to say by that is, in comparison to policy debate and public forum debate and Lincoln Douglas debate, none of these formats have the ability to respond to current events in the same way that Parley does. Parley will have 4 to 6 different topics every tournament, and you will be assigned arbitrarily to defend a side of that topic, which means you potentially have to even address things you don't necessarily agree with, which I think is very good. But with that said, Parley tournaments sometimes also something will like they'll write the 6 tournaments or 7 resolutions, whatever, how many 10 resolutions, however many you want to have for the tournament. But if something happens that night or that morning, they can instantly like that's the next topic. This is now the topic we're defending. Like literally within an hour, you can make kids. That is not possible in any evidentiary format of debate or any format of debate where we have to kind of wait on those things. Parley for breadth of education is phenomenal. My
Okay.
second thing for Parley is that Parley, more so than a lot of debates, and admittedly other debates have this, but certainly not Congress, and I think this goes like against Congress as far as things we're trying to outcompete. Parley is a incredibly stylistically diverse format of debate, which is to say that if you're sitting there thinking, well, I'm a speech coach, or I'm just a parent, or I'm just whatever, you absolutely can coach your kids to be good speakers who just write solid, persuasive essay style arguments and find success in that format against other people because of the diversity of approaches in judging. And conversely, if you've decided that you're more interested in the technical elements of debate, then generally speaking, you can find some kind of tournament or some kind of organization or format which will allow those things. But crucially, those things are almost always tempered in parliamentary debate. People understand that because there is not disclosure, because the topic does change every round, because there is not evidence, there's only so much debaters can be prepared for, which serves as sort of a natural check back for some of the progressive instincts of formats like policy or Lincoln Douglas debate, right? Because there's just limits on what can and cannot be done in parliament. The third thing I would say is judge ratio. I think any format of debate that is 2 competitors to a room, 1 judge, is inherently unsustainable for programs that aren't well funded. We've had nightmares, absolute nightmares, hosting the DVC thing where one school brought 1 judge and 10 competitors. I need 5 judges to cover those kids. Not possible. And a judge for an entire day, even DVC thing, which does a good job of having just 1 day per debate format, is going to cost me $200 or so,
Yeah.
right? And that's $1,000 just to cover that one schools. And so I think those ratios matter. Second, or not second, I guess it's like fourth, I think partner debate events are preferable to single person debate events for the most part. I think there's obviously some downsides in public forum or in policy where you can be building up these cases collaboratively with someone, and then that person bails on you, and now you're kind of screwed, for lack of a better word. But
Yeah.
Parley addresses this concern by having every round change. Like, you literally, there's been tons of Parley tournaments where in the middle of a tournament some kid gets sick and drops out, and then now their partner's just debating 1-on-2, and it's still, doable to a certain extent. And so I think
And
that
hybrids are possible.
hybrids are possible. Yeah, you can compete with other schools, and that's totally allowed, and all of those things. I think that, and again, this may be just a me and not. It's certainly not just a me and Sasan thing, but I think also it does incentivize strategy, but I don't think strategy has to mean what people think it does, right? I think what it incentivizes is problem solving. Strategy and debate is problem solving. It is thinking about the range of possibilities and outcomes associated with a given topic and trying to figure out how best to convince a person who you don't necessarily know to agree with you. And I think that that diversity of strategies increases accessibility rather than decreasing it, because if you're like, you know what my kid likes? He loves history, or he loves politics, or he knows everything about North Korea, or whatever. Parley, since it is not evidentiary, relies heavily on generic style arguments, which means your kid can just, if they know something about some politics bill that's coming up, they can get mileage out of that over and over again. They can get mileage out of their econ dissat over and over again, and they can just explain things in a way that privileges them. And then last thing I would say is, evidentiary debate formats inherently have a cost disincentive associated with them, which is to say, evidence just is locked behind paywalls, and the schools that have access to that evidence do the best. When I looked through some of the wikis for NFALD, this is the college level national championship, there were articles I couldn't even get access to, or books, entire books, right? That if you have a $10,000 a year subscription at your university, you can get that book, but I can't get a copy of it unless I go buy that entire book, and I can't find it on the internet, and I can't check any of your stuff. And there's the brief thing, right? Where these kids in these camps kind of parasitically, in my opinion, exploit kids for money, right? So that they're all and that encourages kids to read the same arguments, which is never encouraged in Parley. It's you almost never in a round, even if kids, both of them, read an econ dissad or like a politics dissad, if there's 10 rounds happening in a tournament, I promise you, no more than 2 of them sound similar. And so that's
Let me
kind
ask
of.
you a question
Go
as
ahead,
though I am a concerned coach.
I have to
But
wrap up right after this, but go ahead, yeah.
But Paul, what I don't understand about Parley is if I don't know what the debate topic is going to be, and I'm not just teaching my kids presentation, what on earth am I teaching them to get them ready?
Research. You're teaching them research skills, and you're teaching them, in my opinion, some of the most applicable research skills, because the reality is most problems we face in our lives, we don't get a month or a year to try and come up with an effective solution to, right? In the workplace, you're given a short amount of time and a deadline. Crucially, deadlines are huge for you to be ready to do that kind of research. And what you're teaching them really is to limit out information, almost, if that makes sense. So what I mean by that is, you try and teach kids to identify for any given issue that might be in the news, what are the relevant considerations, right? When you start hearing about the United Nations, you start thinking about, okay, but is the United Nations a good actor or a bad actor? When you hear anything about the economy, you start thinking about, but how does this interact with business confidence or investor confidence? When you hear anything about the United States military, you start thinking about hegemony and allied confidence. And what you realize in the end is, in debate, really, there's like, I don't know the actual number,
7.
6 to 10
Yeah.
6 to 10 positions that are at least, the topical fiat sort of stuff, which is what sort of happens, that actually exist. And all you're doing is teaching them, how can you structure that model or that schema using the evidence that becomes available to you. And that's why me and Sasan can write a dissad about someone getting a dog just as easily as we can write it about the United States nuclear posture review as it pertains to Iran or North Korea.
Yeah. I think the only other thing that I'd add to that is that in addition to the research and what you're describing, really, I think is an extension of just argumentation theory, which is something that not every coach might inherently be familiar with. But if we can get that information more out there, like that's what I think is so special about Parley is you are learning argumentation theory. And when Parley debaters and Parley coaches talk to each other about debate, they're not talking about a specific thing that they read. They're talking about how information is used in a particular model, right? Like how a logical proposal works and what assumptions it makes and which of those assumptions are weak and which are strong. And that model applies to so many different things, right? In Parley, we don't talk about a counterplan, we talk about counterplans in general, right? We don't talk about a disadvantage, we talk about disadvantages in general, because that's the only thing that is persistent.
All right, I have to wrap up like right now. Good
Okay.
talk, long session.
Yeah,
I'll
good
get this
chat, man.
out. I might divide it up. We'll figure it out. But I'll talk to you, man. Good to see you, everyone.
Peace.
Bye.